We have been looking at biblical characters who disobeyed God and the judgment that they faced from God, even how they were affected in their own hearts. Good morning. This is Pastor Ernie Lewis of the Blue Point Church in Sisti, Illinois, with your thoughts for Monday. Right after Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden because of their sin, they had two sons. They named them Cain and Abel. Cain was a gardener, a crop farmer, while Abel was a keeper of flocks and herds. The Bible tells us that these brothers made their offerings to God one day. In Genesis chapter 4 and verse 3, it says, "In the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And the Lord respected Abel and his offering, but he did not respect Cain and his offering. And Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell." Many believe that Cain's offering was missing the blood. After all, Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 22 says, "And according to the law, almost all things are purified with blood, and without shedding of blood there is no remission." So blood was necessary as this purifying agent when they came to bring a sacrifice. But perhaps the real problem with Cain was his attitude of his heart when he gave his sacrifice and it was not acceptable to the Lord. After all, he knows our hearts no matter what we do outwardly. He must have rebelled against God's commands about the sacrifice. Samuel told King Saul in the Old Testament, "For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry." The problem of rebelling against what God really wants is that we seem to worship ourselves or something else that is so much more evil than just disobedience. After Cain is reprimanded for his sacrifice, he becomes angry against his brother. Doesn't it seem like disobedience turns us into someone or maybe even something else rather than really what God would want us to be? God even reproached Cain to remind him that he could come back from his ways even though he had become depressed and made himself a victim of God's anger. From this first act of disobedience, Cain gets angry with his brother out of jealousy, since Abel's sacrifice was accepted and his was not. So Cain finds his brother in the field and he slays him over this rebellion in his heart. Now Cain is not only the first murderer, he becomes a fugitive, a vagabond in history. We never know what a single disobedient act will turn into in our heart. I think the judgment that comes from rebelling against God is always more than we expected. These examples in Scripture are not just stories that they're telling, they're reminding us of what kind of things happen whenever we're disobedient to God. Even the smallest kind of rebellion against God will bring some serious consequences in our lives.